I'm not sure how to start this without feeling a little embarrassed, even though I know this is a space where people come to tell the truth. I guess the simplest way is to say that I'm tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles into your chest and stays there. I've been carrying it for years, and only recently did I realize how heavy it actually is. I'm 34 years old. I live in the United States, in a quiet suburban area that looks peaceful from the outside. I'm married, I work full-time, I pay my bills, I show up. On paper, my life looks stable, but most days I feel like I'm slowly disappearing inside it. I wake up early, usually before my alarm. There's always a moment when I lie still in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what day it is and what version of myself I need to be. The responsible one, the calm one, the agreeable one, the one who doesn't make things difficult. My husband is usually asleep beside me, turned away. We don't really talk in the mornings anymore. We exchange information, not feelings. Schedules, reminders, short answers. At work, I do what's expected of me. I smile when appropriate. I listen more than I speak. I've learned that it's easier that way. When I do speak, I often replay my words in my head later, wondering if I sounded stupid or dramatic or unnecessary. That habit didn't come from nowhere. It was taught to me slowly, through small comments and subtle reactions over time. When I get home, the house is quiet. Too quiet. I used to think that quiet meant peace, but now I know it can also mean absence. I cook dinner, I clean up, I wait. When my husband comes home, he's usually tired, or distracted, or irritated, sometimes all three. I've learned how to read his mood within seconds of hearing the door close. That skill feels less like love and more like survival. For a long time, I told myself this was just what long relationships turned into. That passion fades, that conversations shorten, that needs become inconveniences. Whenever I felt lonely, I'd remind myself that I was married, that I wasn't alone in the technical sense. But loneliness doesn't care about technicalities. It shows up anyway. There are moments, small ones, that started to pile up. Times when I'd try to share something that mattered to me, and he'd interrupt, or correct my memory, or tell me I was overreacting. If I said something hurt me, he'd say he never said that, or that I misunderstood his tone, or that I was being too sensitive again. That word, again, echoed in my head more times than I can count. I started doubting myself, my memory, my emotions. I'd apologize even when I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I learned how to swallow words before they reached my mouth. I learned how to make myself smaller so the space between us wouldn't feel so tense. Somewhere along the way, I stopped calling my friends. It wasn't a decision exactly, just a gradual fading. I didn't feel like I had anything interesting to say. I didn't want to explain why I was always tired, always unsure, always cancelling plans. It felt easier to stay home and keep things quiet. If this story is already starting to feel familiar to you, I want to gently say this. You're not alone. And if these kinds of stories help you feel seen or understood, I invite you to stay, to listen, and to be part of this space. Sometimes just knowing others are listening makes the silence a little less heavy. The tension in my life didn't explode all at once. It crept in. It showed up in the way my chest tightened before I spoke, in the way I rehearsed conversations in my head that never happened, in the way I felt relief when I was alone and guilt for feeling that relief. The moment that changed everything wasn't dramatic. There was no yelling, no slammed doors. It was an ordinary evening. I had had a hard day at work, one of those days where nothing goes wrong exactly, but everything feels heavier than it should. I remember standing in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, trying to explain how overwhelmed I felt. I didn't even get through the sentence. He sighed, not loudly, just enough. And then he said calmly that I was making a big deal out of nothing, that everyone feels stressed, that I always do this, that maybe the problem wasn't the situation, but the way I choose to see it. Something in me went very still. I remember nodding. I remember saying, "You're right." But inside, something cracked, not loudly, quietly, like a hairline fracture you don't notice until later, when the structure starts to fail. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the times I'd been told my feelings were wrong, all the times I'd been corrected about my own experiences, all the times I'd trusted someone else's version of reality over my own. And for the first time, a question formed that scared me. What if I'm not the problem? That question didn't bring relief right away. It brought fear, confusion, grief. Because if I wasn't the problem, then I had been living in something that wasn't healthy. And naming that meant I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't suddenly become strong or brave. I didn't confront him the next day. What changed was quieter. I started paying attention. I noticed how often I felt tense around him, how often I felt calm when he wasn't there. I noticed how my body reacted before my mind caught up. Healing for me didn't look like leaving right away or finding some dramatic solution. It looked like small moments of honesty with myself, like writing things down so I wouldn't forget them later, like allowing myself to feel sad without immediately dismissing it. I'm still in the middle of this story. I don't have a perfect ending to offer, but I have something else: awareness. And that awareness has given me a small sense of grounding I didn't have before. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life in mine, I want you to know that you're not imagining things. Your feelings don't need permission to exist. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply admit quietly that something doesn't feel right. Thank you for listening, for holding this space with me. Shared stories don't fix everything, but they remind us that we're not alone in our confusion, our pain, or our hope.